Welcome to part 2 of how to make a first-person shooter in GDevelop. Now, in this part of the tutorial, we're mainly going to be doing three things. We're going to be doing bullets, being able to destroy objects. We're also going to be optimizing the bullets, making sure they can't go too far off screen. And then finally, we're also going to be adding animations to the gun object that's commonly used in nearly all FPS games. But before we begin, if you haven't watched part 1, make sure to watch part 1 first. And also, if you're a beginner or new to GDevelop or game development in general, make sure to check out the link in the description of the No Code Revolution. You can also check out the comments as well to check out the No Code Revolution, learn the fundamentals of game development. Now that we're done with that, let's get straight into the tutorial. Now, the first thing we want to do is the simplest part, which is making bullets destroy the box. So this is extremely easy to do with 3D collision. So I'm going to go into our events, add a new event, and then add a new event group. Now, you don't have to actually add a new event group. I just do this to keep my project organized. I'm going to call this bullet destruction. And that's because we're going to be using bullets to destroy the box. I'm going to drag this event under the event group. And the condition we want to add if the bullet is in collision with the box, then we want to destroy the bullet and we want to destroy the box. So I'm going to add a condition and I'm going to click into the bullet. Now, if you scroll down the collision tab, you see that we have two things, collision in 3D, and then we have collision. Now, of course, obviously, you probably want to use collision in 3D, but just in case you got curious, do not use collision for just regular instead of collision in 3D. Do not use this regular collision because that would not take into account the Z position of the object. So even though it takes into account the X and Y, it will not take into account the Z, which in our case is the height of a 3D object. So if we use collision in 3D, and the other object, we want to check if bullet is in collision with the box. So we're going to put the box here. I'm going to hit OK. Now that we have the condition, this is the if statement, as you can say. Now we want to have the action. So the action that we want to have is we want to delete the bullet, and then we want to also delete the box at the same time. So we're going to add an action. I'm going to click into our bullet, and then type in delete. And it will delete the object. I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to copy the same action, and then paste it. And you can click into the bullet text right here that's colored, delete it, and then put delete the box as well. So if I preview this now, if I click and then shoot, you'll see that the bullet immediately destroys the box and they both get destroyed at the same time. I'm going to preview this one more time just to show you that it works. If I shoot over the box, you can see that it won't get destroyed, but if I shoot on the box, you see it actually does get destroyed. So now that that's done, the object destruction, we're going to want to do the second thing, which is making the bullet being optimized so it can't go too far off screen. Right now, our bullets are going way off screen, and eventually they do disappear, but even though we can't see them anymore, they're actually still in the scene. They have not destroyed themselves because they don't destroy themselves unless we tell them to. So we need to optimize this program so they actually destroy themselves when they get away from a certain distance from the player. So let's do that next. So we're going to go to our events, and I'm going to add a new event. Right click and then add a new event group. Once again, you don't have to do this, but it's a good practice to keep your project organized. I'm going to call this event group bullet optimization. Let's keep the consistency in terms of the spelling and capitalization. Now we have bullet optimization. I'm going to once again drag this event under here. Now let's talk it out first. Now, what we want to do is check if the bullet is not within a certain distance of the player. Normally, we'll use to check whether or not we're close to an object, we'll use the condition if the object is within a certain amount of pixels to the player or something like that. Basically, we're trying to check if it's close, but we want to do the opposite of that. We want to check if it's not within a certain distance. So how do we do this? Well, we want to check the distance between two objects and then invert that condition. So I'm going to add a condition. I'm going to click the bullet, and if you type in distance, you'll see that we have two main conditions. We have distance between two objects for 2D, and then we have distance between two objects for 3D. Now, this needs to be fixed. This normally should work, but it doesn't. Now, I know you may want to use distance between two objects in 3D, and then just choose the two objects instead of distance, and then invert it to check if it's farther than a certain distance. But you can't do that. For some reason, it's maybe a bug in the way that developer made this extension. You cannot invert this condition. It will not work the way it should. You try to invert the distance between two objects in 3D. So for now, we have to use the 2D. Now, note this does get the job done because the height doesn't really matter too much. Once we get to a certain length from the player, we want to get rid of it. But this is not perfect. But until this is fixed by the developer, we'll probably have to use some more complicated calculations in order for it to work. So since this is kind of a simpler tutorial, we're not going to be going through all these calculations. We can just simply use the 2D distance between two objects. Enough gabbing and gapping, as they say. Let's get into this. So we want to check if the bullet is within a certain distance from the camera, which is also the player. And here we have another parameter, and this is the distance. Now, remember, these bullets are moving very fast, and they're moving in a lot of pixels per second. Remember, a pixel is extremely, extremely small. So I'm going to set the distance as if the bullet is 2,500 pixels away from the player or the camera, then we want to destroy it. Now make sure the slider is inverted, because if it's not inverted, then we're saying that if it's within 2,500 pixels, then we want to destroy it. But we want to see if it's not within that amount of distance. So I'm going to hit OK, and let's add the action. The action, we can actually just copy and paste it from here. Copy and paste. We want to, once again, delete the bullet. Now, you saw last time the bullets just kept flying and flying. Now, if I shoot them now, they disappear way faster. And they're actually destroying themselves, so they won't cause performance issues. Now, just to show you this, like the problem with it, you'll see that if I shoot it upwards, it still goes all the way far out. And that's because it's not moving on the X and Y that much, which is why I told you that's the one issue with using this 2D one. But the 3D one doesn't work yet, so you just have to deal with it right now. And you could do calculations. It wouldn't be too hard, but we're not going to spend a lot of time doing that in this tutorial. Now, the next thing we want to do is the gun animation for our camera. Now, the first thing we want to do to start making our gun animations is actually go to the project manager. Now, you may be wondering, why are we going to the project manager? Well, I'll explain in a few seconds. So let's go to the top left and go into our properties. Now, the reason why we're going to the project manager is because when we change our game to full screen, we don't want any of the UI to change. And our gun that we're going to be using, that's always going to be on the screen, that will be UI. It will not be a part of the base layer. So we're going to put no changes in game size. I already have it set up here. But by default, it's like this. So all you have to do is put no changes to game size, and you'll be fine. This is just a general practice for GDevelop in general. Just set that option as not what's checked on. So now we're going to actually add the 3D model. And I got this 3D model from Sketchfab. You can use whatever 3D model you want, but I also have the link in the description so you can use exactly what I'm using so you don't run into any weird problems just in case. But this should work for any FPS 3D arms. So I'm going to add a new object, and we don't want to add a sprite or 3D box. We want to add animate 3D model, and we're going to call the 3D model gun. Now, I already have it right here because I've already loaded it up, but normally you have to choose a file and then you have to click into it, of course. Now, of course, GDevelop only supports .glb, so if you're importing your own FPS arms, if it's not a .glb file, you need to convert it using a 3D software like Blender. Blender is very easy to do, even if you don't know Blender. So, if I use, you see we have the material modifier, and this normally emits all ambient light. We're going to keep this checked on. Basically, if you have lighting in your 3D scene, it will actually react to the light. So normally you want to keep this on. Everything else we don't really care about right now. We're going to leave that as it is. Now, if I hit apply and then drag it onto the scene, you'll see that it's super, super small. Like, I have to zoom in a bunch just to see it. And the gun is facing towards us instead of facing away from the camera. So I'm going to drag over this object. And first of all, since we have the keep ratio, it will automatically keep its normal ratio of size. So all I have to do is go to the side right here, and then you'll see two arrows pop up in different directions, and you can just drag it to the right to make it go up. It'll make the gun bigger. Also, we want to make it so it doesn't face towards us, like it's literally about to shoot us. So we want to go into our rotation Y, and then you can drag it until it's not facing you anymore. And we can have it like, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. And I'm going to drag it over here. And I have a gun in the corner like this. And if I preview, we're going to run into a major issue. And you'll see that once we open the preview, the gun is not how we put it on our actual scene. It's completely out of whack. It's completely in a different orientation. And that's because it's trying to follow the rules of the base layer. And remember, the base layer's camera is based off of this camera's eyes. It's looking through this camera's eyes. So it's kind of giving it a weird effect. It's kind of hard to explain exactly what's going on here. But basically, it's not being affected by the regular camera rules. So what we're going to do is add a layer. And we're going to call this, I'm not going to call it UI, I'm just going to call it static. because everything on this layer should not be moving at all. So now if I click into the gun object, and then I go into base layer, and then I click static, we shouldn't have this issue anymore because it won't be attached to that camera. So if I preview now, you see that the gun is actually from the side like we want. So this is good. I'm gonna click into it. I'm gonna move it a little bit more to like this. Looks better like this. And now that we have that, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. But now we have to actually add the animations for it. Now, in order to first of all add animations, we have to set up the animations in the object itself. So I'm going to double click into the gun. Then you can add animations under here. So I'm going to add an animation. And if you choose an animation name, you'll see that we have all of the animation names pop up. Now, keep in mind, if you get your own FPS arms, they will be named differently from the FPS arms that I used. And also, if you're missing animations, you can try to click this scan missing animations, and it might be able to find them. I've never really tested it out, though. Normally, it always works. So, we have different animations. Now, we want to set a default animation. And the default animation, we can actually leave it blank. Because if you look in here, we have inspect, we have like reload. I think he didn't put reload. Shot, we have reload F. We have run, and then we have walk. But we want to have an animation where our gun is like it is now, where it's being completely still. So we're actually, for this, animation 0, we're not going to put an animation in here at all. I'm going to add another animation. I'm going to use the animation name walk. And we're going to choose the animation, and we're going to put walk. We're also going to add another animation. This animation is going to be called run. You can try and see the pattern here. And I'm going to click into run. And then we want to also loop. We want to loop the walk, and we want to loop the run. And one more animation we want to add is the shoot animation. I'm going to choose an animation name, and then I'm going to put shot right here. And we don't want to loop this one. We don't want to loop it at all. So I'm going to hit apply. Well, nothing's going to happen because right now, by default, animation 0 is what's first played on all objects. So right now, it's just going to stay still, because there's no auto animation that we have. So let's say we want to do the walking. If we want to do the walking animation, now we have to start setting up conditions where if these certain conditions are met, then we want to change the gun animation to be equal to walking. So let's start with the walking animation. Now, actually, let's not start with the walking animation. Let's start with the default animation, because we want to be able to cycle through different animations. Now, the default animation will only be playing if we're not moving at all. We have to not be moving at all. So how do we detect this? Now remember, if I go into my project manager and you look into the side, you see that we have all these extensions, but the important one here is the walk 3D extension. This controls the movement for our 3D object. We set this up in the part 1. So basically we're going to be checking if our forward speed of our camera or our player is equal to 0, and if the sideways speed of our camera is equal to 0. Then we want to change the animation of the gun to be set to default. So let's do that. So under the movement, I'm going to click into this bottom event and then type in Shift A, which is a keyboard shortcut for adding a new event. You can also right click and add a new event below. But we're going to add the first condition. So add a condition, and we're going to click into camera. And if you scroll down, you want to scroll down until it says top down. Let's see, top down walk. We want to see top-down walk acceleration, probably. We want to check the acceleration. We want to check this. We have to see, yeah, current top-down walk state. Sometimes it's hard for me to find my stuff. So we want to see if the current forward speed is equal to 0. That's what we want to check first. And once again, since we're going to be trying to check 2 conditions, we want to put and. So I'm going to add condition, go into other conditions, events and control flow, and then click and. Then we also want to check, click into our camera, scroll down, and set our current sideways speed 0. So basically what we're saying right now, we're saying if the current forward speed of the camera is equal to 0, and if the current sideways speed of the camera is equal to 0, then we want to do something. Now, for animations like this, I say you should add a sub-event under here, just in case you want to set off different things for if you're being still or something. But as a general practice, is to add a sub-event under here. You don't actually have to do this if you want to. But when this condition is met, then it will run the sub condition. And the condition that we want to be run now, or the action that we want to be run now, is setting the walk, setting the animation to be walk. Saying, well, not walk, default. I'm making a lot of mess ups right now. but we're going to click into our gun, and then you can type in animation just like a regular 2D object, and you can play an animation. Now you could do it by number, or you could do it by name. It's better to do it by name most of the time. So we want to set it to default. And if I preview this now, nothing's going to change because it was already default. So nothing's going to change at all. So now what we want to do is do the walking animation. We want to do the walking animation. So everything is completely the same right now. Now let's do the walk. Now for our walk, we want to see if we're moving. Now, it's not like a regular platformer object. Let me add a new event so we can. Not like a regular platformer object. If I add a condition and then I click into the camera, there's nothing that asks whether or not. There's nothing that says whether or not I'm moving, like it does on like a platform behavior. So how do we check if we're moving without a condition that does it for us? Well, we need to combine the two conditions. Remember, the way we checked being still is we checked if the current forward speed and if the current sideways speed were both equal to 0. Now, to check whether or not we're moving, we need to check whether or not the current forward speed or if the current sideways speed is not equal to 0. If either of those are not equal to 0, then we know that we're moving. So I'm going to hit cancel right here, and then I'm going to go back into it. So what we can do is click into our gun right here. And actually, let's not do that first. We want to click OR, because remember, we have two conditions that we're trying to check if either one of those are true. If one of those are true, then we want to set off the action. So we're going to start with events and control flow, and then OR. Then go to add a sub condition. Make sure you add a sub condition and not a regular action. Well, regular condition. And I'm going to click into camera, and then you see current forward speed. We want to set it equal to 0, but then we want to convert it because we're basically saying if it's not equal to 0, if it's not equal to 0. And also we want to check add another sub condition. Click into the gun and scroll down into where it says want to see. Well, click into the camera, not the gun. Then scroll up. And we want to check if the current sideways speed also is not equal to 0. So we're going to invert this condition as well. And if either one of these are true, then we want to set the animation of our gun to be equal to walk instead. So I'm going to put Shift A. And then I'm going to, well, not Shift A. Well, I already did it now, but you can drag a condition under another one to make it a sub event. So now we want to change the animation. Instead of being equal to default, I'm going to copy and paste it here. We're going to set it as being equal to run. Not run, walk. So walk. Once again, here. Set equal to walk. And now if I forward, you'll see that we actually are in our walking animation already. If you press W. And if you stop pressing W, you'll see that you'll stop walking. If I move backwards, you kind of can't really tell that I'm moving because we don't have like an object on screen, but let's reference. If I move sideways, I also start walking. So the walking animation is working. Walking animation is working. Now we have a few more animations to do. We have the running animation, and then we also have the shooting animation. Now before we set up this running animation, normally in an FPS game, use the shift key to start running. Now when it comes to our FPS game, the running condition is almost going to be exactly the same as the walking condition. We're going to see if the current forward speed of the camera is not equal to 0. And we also want to check if the left key shift is pressed. Now, these are kind of having an issue because they're just using the same condition. So for this walking, not only do we want to check if the current forward speed of the camera is not equal to 0 and the current sideways speed of the camera is not equal to 0, we also want to check if the shift key is not being pressed. Let's add another condition now. Make sure you add a regular condition and not a sub condition right now. We're going to add a condition. We want to go into other conditions, events control flow, and click into and. Then we're going to add a sub condition under that and. We want to go into other conditions, keyboard, key press, and if you put L shift, this stands for the left key shift, which means this is the shift key to the left, on the left of your keyboard. There's two shift keys on your keyboard. We want to put left shift, and we want to check if it's not being pressed. So we want to invert the condition, and then we'll be able to walk. So as a test, you can start walking. I'm not sure why I kind of moved down right there. Weird little the fixes. But you'll see that we're walking and stuff right now. We're walking. And now if I press shift and then start moving, it will not enter as walk animation. It will not enter as walk animation at all. So I'm going to preview this again because it seems like it kind of bugged a little bit. Kind of moving up first. Really weird. And that's because I seem like I set a rotation to 90 on. You probably didn't run into that problem. That's just something weird that I did. Making rookie mistake, but it happens. So now we're walking like regular. Gonna hit shift. We're walking regular. If I'm holding shift first and then I start running, we're walking, it won't do anything. But we're saving that for our run animation. Now, I'm trying to actually make the run animation now. So I'm gonna put shift A, new event. And I'm basically gonna copy this event right here. I'm gonna copy it, paste it. And we still want to check whether these are not equal to 0. But instead of checking whether or not the left key is not pressed, we want to check if it is pressed. So we're going to uninvert that condition and then change the animation from change it from run, we'll walk to run. Let's see what happens now. We're going to preview the scene. See what happens. If I hold shift, you see that we're now in our run animation. We are now in our run animation. So this is really good. Now we have the running animation. So this is cool. So another thing we want to do. When we're running, we want to actually move faster, of course. We want to move faster in the forward direction. Now, in order for us to finish the running, we need to actually make the player speed up now when the shift key is being pressed or when it's not being pressed. So we're going to add a new condition and then add a condition right here. And we want to go into our other conditions. We want the keyboard, key pressed, L shift. So we want to check if L shift is pressed. We're going to add an action. We're going to click into our camera. And we want to change the maximum running speed. Now, it can be kind of annoying trying to find all of this speed right here. Like, you can see the maximum speed here. But it's just better to type it up. Maximum speed. And you'll see the top-down walk configuration. We want to set the maximum speed as being equal to 600. So this is basically the max potential speed that our player can go to when L shift is pressed. Now I'm going to copy and paste the same event and paste it again. And now we want to check if L shift key is not pressed, so we can invert the condition. Then we want to set the maximum speed of our camera to be equal to 300. I'm going to preview this now. Let's see what happens. Now, I should never delete that so we can actually see whether or not we're moving. So, if I walk regularly, you'll see that I'm not the fastest in the world if I walk regularly. But if I hold shift, you see that I start moving faster and I enter the run animation. Now, don't get mad at me when you see this. This is not my fault. If you keep holding shift and it doesn't really loop well, the animation. It looks kind of weird. It looks kind of funny. And this is not even my fault. This is the person who made the animation of this gun. This is, like I said, not the best one you can find, but you can find other ones out there that will loop better than that does. So, now that we have the running animation done and the speed changes done, last but not least, we want to actually do the shooting animation. Now, the shooting animation, very, very, very easy to do. Now, basically what's going to happen is it's going to quickly go to its default state, and then it's going to wait a little bit, and then it's going to go back to its shooting state. Now, this doesn't make any sense to you right now. I'm going to explain to you why. I'm going to see that we have our shooting conditions. Now, we have like 3 shooting conditions. We have 3 shooting conditions. So we're going to add a sub-event. We're going to add a sub-event. So you can click into the condition first and then put Shift-D, or you can right-click, add, and then add a sub-event. So now that we have that, basically when we click, when we shoot, these conditions will be run after. These conditions, they'll do another check of these conditions, what's happening. So I'm going to add a condition right now. We only want this animation to play once. So I'm going to add the condition of trigger once while true. And now for the actions. Now I'm going to do what seems obvious first. I'm going to click into the gun and then type in animation, change the animation by its name, and then set it equal to shoot. You might think this will work. I'm going to copy and paste this basically for all of our sub-events. So you can click under the sub-event and then paste. already copied it, click under this sub event, and then paste, and it'll be a sub event under the same condition. So now that we have this, if I preview this, you might think, okay, this is gonna work. It's gonna work. So if I click, first of all, nothing even happened at all. The gun didn't even move. The gun did not even move in the least. It did not move in the least. Why is that? Why is that it did not move? Well, first of all, let's check. Let's do some troubleshooting. And the way that we fix this problem is we set this animation, because it's constantly being played, the camera forward speed and the sideways speed equal to 0. The way that we stop this is by setting it the trigger once. So basically what's happening is when the current forward speed of the camera is equal to 0 and the sideways speed is equal to 0, this always condition right here, because it's blank, it just keeps changing it the default. It keeps doing it instead of only doing it once. So we're going to put trigger once, and to events and control flow, trigger once. Same thing we're going to do for the other conditions as well. For the walk, we're going to put trigger once. And for the run, we actually don't have to allow shooting while running, but I'm going to just do it anyway. Like I said, this is not the perfect system for animations. If you want a better system for animations as a research assignment, you can look up finite state machines. But it's simpler when you're doing it like this when you have a few animations. Now that we have that, we want to go into our shoot. We have the commands already. So if I preview this, you'll see that something peculiar happens. Now, if I click, you'll see that the gun actually did shoot. So you might think, okay, we did it. Well, we didn't do it. It's when we just stand there and shoot, it only plays the animation once, and then it will just stop doing it unless we cycle to another animation. And that's why we have to use a technique that I call animation cycling, where we switch it to another animation first so it can refresh itself, and then we switch it back. Because basically what's happening is like, okay, trigger once, we'll set the animation to be equal to shoot. But then it's like, okay, you only told me to trigger it once, so if you shoot again, I'm not going to do it again. So we have to cycle it to a new animation so it can be basically refresh itself, so it'll trigger it again. So we're going to add an action, click into our gun, and type in animation. And we're going to click into animation by name, choose the animation, and we're going to click default. Click default. And we want to drag this up top. And we're going to use another action and go into other actions. Timers and time. We're going to wait X seconds. The amount of seconds we want to wait is, 0.1 seconds. Whenever you're doing animation cycling, you only want to wait a really small amount of time. So I'm going to copy and paste this into our other sub events. I'm going to first switch the animation default. Then we're going to wait 0.1 seconds. Then we're going to switch it to shoot. Same thing for the last one. Switch it to default first. Drag it over. And then paste wait 0.1 seconds. The order right here is important, because normally when you're doing actions, the order is not important. But when you change the animation of the gun to default, you're saying do that first, switch it to default, wait 0.1 seconds, and then switch it to shoot. So if I preview this now, I can just shoot. Now, of course, it's a little bit choppy with these animations. It can be kind of choppy sometimes. And the reason why they can be a little bit choppy is because we don't have crossfading in default GDevelop. We don't have crossfading. So they can be a little bit choppy. So that's why we can't really control that much. But that's how you do the animations for the gun. Notice these are not 100% perfect. There are a few problems with this. That's why in the latter parts of this tutorial, we're going to be replacing this with a finite state machine. I'm just showing you these animations because it can be a little bit time consuming trying to set up a finite state machine. So I don't really want to take all the day trying to set that up. But we have the finite state machine. We're going to have that in some future parts. But that's how you do the gun animation. Remember, you can use all sorts of different ones. You can get them from Sketchfab or design them yourself if you know how to. But that is the end of that tutorial. In part 3, if you all want a part 3 of this tutorial, if you want a part 3, make sure to like, comment down below if you do want a part 3. But if you do want a part 3, and part 3 will be covering enemy AI mainly, making enemies that will actually follow the player, being able to kill the enemies like in a regular first-person shooter game. But make sure you let me know if you all want a part 3 so I can know whether or not that part should be made or not. Once again, If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss on any of the new videos. And with that, I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll catch you in the next tutorial. See ya.